boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, some recent developments in the career of WBA super featherweight champion Gravante Davis, where initially he thought that he may not fight this year because
might have broken his hand.
The news itself has since changed. The hand appears to be okay, and Gravante will be getting back out there, at least according to him, sometime in June, per his social media accounts. And, you know, that kind of a schedule would allow Gravante Davis' opponent, if that opponent is Abner Mares, for example, that kind of a schedule would allow a guy like Abner the chance to have a little tune-up fight, a little warm-up, because a guy like Abner Mares needs one. The guy hasn't fought in something like 3 years. He's still coming off that loss to Leo Santa Cruz. He never rebounded off of that. An eye injury
set him back,
prevented Abner Mares' ring return.
He was supposed to have fought Davis a long time ago.
I believe there was an issue with Abner Mares' retina in one of his eyes, and that pretty much stifled those plans. On this kind of schedule,
June,
Gravante Davis is going to be returning to action in June. That could, hypothetically speaking, allow a guy like Abner Mares to have a little tune-up fight, a little tick-over, a little keep-busy fight, to shake off the ring rust, shake off the cobwebs, sometime in, I don't know, March, April?
Because he needs to.
Perhaps come back at 130 pounds, it being that it would be highly unethical to allow Gravante Davis to defend the WBA super title at 130 pounds. It would be highly unethical to allow him to fight a guy like Abner Mares under those circumstances straight away after a 3-year hiatus.
3 years.
Coming off a loss, not even at 130 pounds, but at 126, to a guy that Gravante Davis just fucking knocked out in his last fight.
That'd be pretty unethical.
I'm just brainstorming here. I'm just bouncing ideas around. And, you know, that kind of schedule, Gravante returning to the ring in June, it would allow a guy like Abner to make his ring return before that.
In March or April.
That is, assuming that Abner Mares is the next guy that Gravante is going to be fighting. This is all on the premise that the rumors are true, and Abner Mares is going to be his very next opponent. That is going to be Gravante's very next fight. It's all on the premise that those rumors check out. The reason that those rumors seem plausible enough that they could come into fruition. The reason, you know, people are believing this stuff is because, hey, Gravante Davis was supposed to fight this guy before, and the PBC, you know, they ain't got that many ponies in that 130-pound show. Really don't. It's very difficult to stage a fight for Gravante that is in keeping with their island policy of keeping as much in-house as possible. The most they can do in that situation is have one of their smaller fighters, one of their little guys, move up to super featherweight, where they did with Leo.
Originally, that's what they were going to do with Mares.
And perhaps now that some time has passed and the eye has had the opportunity to heal, they're
revisiting those plans.
I tell you guys all the time, a lot of people like to think of Gravante Davis as being a part of that lightweight conversation, that 135-pound conversation involving Teofimo Lopez, involving Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, and I maintain my original position throughout. Gravante Davis is not going to fight any of those guys in the near future.
He's at super featherweight.
And, you know, there are obvious risks involved with a Lopez fight, with a Haney fight, and even, to some extent, with a Ryan Garcia fight. There are those risks to reconcile, but there are also the network and promotional issues to reconcile, as every single one of those fighters is with a different outfit than Gravante Davis, and each other.
In an ideal world, that wouldn't matter.
In an ideal world, it wouldn't, but this world is hardly ideal, and when it comes to ideals, things are hardly ideal in the sport of boxing. Those just ain't the kind of fights that happen overnight.
In all likelihood, they're going to feed him another little guy.
In all likelihood, they're going to feed him Abner Mares. Of course, I'll tell you something. Aside from Abner, I don't know what else the PBC's got anywhere at or 126 to 130 pounds. I know that Gary Russell Jr. is there, the reigning WBC featherweight champion, but I have the sneaking suspicion that Gary is going to stay at featherweight a little while longer.
Maybe he moves up to fight Davis at some point.
I'm not sure that's what's going to happen next.
Mares might be next.
Now, in lightweight news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Devin Haney versus Jorge Linares is possible for April. Eddie Hearn has said. He explained this is because he's heard rumors Haney's mandatories, Ryan Garcia and Javier Fortuna, could be fighting each other next. And I'll tell you that one set of comments that lends credence to the notion that perhaps young Ryan could be facing Javier Fortuna as opposed to Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao, whose name, Ryan's name, has been tacked on the last couple of days, last couple of weeks. One set of comments that lends credence to the notion that Ryan won't be fighting Manny next
Came from Eddie Reynoso.
Ryan's trainer, who is quoted as saying, "The fight I like more than Manny Pacquiao is Tank Davis." To me, it's a far more interesting fight. They are at the same weight, and their fight can exceed expectations. The final decision is made by Golden Boy Promotions, but they value my input and take it into consideration, and I am pleased with that part of it. Now, we just talked about Tank, and we know that, in all likelihood, Ryan Garcia won't be Tank Davis's next opponent. We know that. But what we also know is that Eddie Reynoso, he doesn't seem too crazy about that Manny Pacquiao fight.
He doesn't like that very much.
I like that Pacquiao fight. Manny Pacquiao, who very recently took to his social media account and let the boxing world know that he's starting camp for his very next fight. He's starting camp for his next engagement. And if I'm being honest, I don't think that engagement is going to involve Ryan Garcia. I'd sooner believe his next engagement will involve Mikey Garcia.
Why is that?
Because Mikey Garcia very recently was quoted as saying he's going to be fighting later on this year. Because Mikey Garcia appears to be on a similar schedule to Manny Pacquiao. A fight between them would be ideal, and this isn't the first we would have heard of a fight between them. That was the original plan, wasn't it? To have Manny fight Mikey.
I think Pacquiao versus Garcia. Mikey Garcia is going to be the next fight for those two guys.
At least I believe that more than I believe that Ryan Garcia is going to be Manny Pacquiao's next opponent. From where I'm sitting, that is a fight that doesn't make sense. Those are very strange bedfellows, given that Ryan Garcia, he hasn't even really fought for a world title, a full-fledged world title yet. The discrepancy in experience, the discrepancy in weight.
Come on.
I don't know how anybody in good conscience could decide that now is the best time for Ryan Garcia to fight Manny Pacquiao.
And given Eddie Reynoso's comments, I don't think that fight is next.
It just doesn't make any sense. A more reasonable step up in competition for young Ryan Garcia would have to be Javier Fortuna of the Dominican Republic, who is a top 10 lightweight in the division. You know, we're not just talking about alphabet rank standings. We're talking about divisional rank standings, the 10 best fighters at the weight. Javier Fortuna is one of them.
And that is what the rumor mill is spinning.
That's what Eddie Hearn said that he heard. I'll tell you that if Javier Fortuna is Ryan Garcia's next opponent, and as a result of that, Devin Haney ends up fighting Jorge Linares, I can't complain. I think both of those matchups are solid matchups and good step-ups in competition for both of those young fighters.
Those are good fights.
I know that the very harsh critics out there are going to be very critical of Ryan Garcia for having fought in a WBC final eliminator against Luke Campbell for a shot at Devin Haney's title, a shot that he doesn't seem to want all that bad. I understand those sentiments, I do, but looking at a Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna fight,
That ain't no walk in the park for Ryan.
Javier Fortuna is an aggressive, rough and tumble, physical kind of fighter. An ideal litmus test for Ryan Garcia. The ideal litmus test for Ryan Garcia in his next outing. I like the fight. Comes to Devin Haney versus Jorge Linares. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. A guy like Jorge is
Experienced.
a cut above the kind of guys that Devin Haney has been fighting so far. So if he can get that guy in the ring, I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with both of these fights.
I, like many of you, would like to see Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia happen sooner rather than later. But if it doesn't, and this is the alternative, and these are the substitutes, as they were, if that's the case, you know what? Those ain't bad fights. Those make for entertaining matchups. The only thing left to do now is to wait and see if these rumors are more than just rumors, if these rumors come into fruition, if these rumors check out. And finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos Jr. is reportedly going to purse bids on February 18th because of a disagreement between Top Rank and Lopez over his purse. Bob Arum said, "This is not a marquee fight. If somebody outbids us, it's fine. I don't care." I'd wager that a lot of you out there are hearing this and thinking to yourselves, This is yet another example of Bob Arum exhibiting a wavering commitment to one of his own fighters, one of his own star players. And I understand where those sentiments might come from, as Bob has had a very blasé attitude as of late in reference to what demands his own fighters under his own banner might have. I get it. I understand it. But in truth, that kind of a conclusion would have to be coming from an overall lack of understanding of this business. In a nutshell, the number that Lopez wants isn't a number that the people over there at Top Rank are willing to put up. And that's because, George Kambosos fight, mandatory challenger that he might be.
This ain't a big fight.
That's not a big fight. That's not a big marquee attraction. Nobody's clawing at their faces to see that fight. I will say that this is a deviation from the initial reports, which indicated they were going to send Teofimo Lopez to the land down under to have that fight in front of a big crowd full of Aussies. It being that the Aussies, they have live gates.
They got crowds.
I vaguely recall some rumblings of the Maloney brothers, one or both of them, being on the undercard. That was the proposed plan.
I think that's what they wanted to do.
Initially, based on what initial rumblings, initial reports were out there. And something happened here today. I'm not sure what, but that plan doesn't appear to be in motion.
Doesn't seem to be working out.
For what reason specifically, I don't know, but that's what the initial plan was, and because that initial plan isn't working out, and Teofimo Lopez, he wants to get paid a certain dollar amount, he wants to get paid a certain way, a way that Top Rank isn't in agreement with, at least not for this fight. What they're going to do is let it go to a purse bid, and you might think to yourself that maybe that's a wavering commitment yet again from Bob towards one of his own fighters.
Maybe.
That might be how those of you out there interpret this, but he's not actually stifling Teofimo Lopez's career or his earning power by allowing someone else to bid on the fight. Someone else who perhaps is willing to stake more of their own money than Bob is.
Let the fight go to the highest bidder.
If someone out there is willing to put up more money for the fight than the people over there at Top Rank are, if someone else out there is willing to put up more money than Bob is, then let them host the fight. That only increases Teofimo Lopez's chances of getting at the kind of money that he wants to get at.
And if nobody out there outbids Top Rank,
If none of these other outfits, none of these other promoters are willing to spend more than Top Rank is for this fight in order to host it, you have your answer.
Teofimo Lopez will.
As far as what this fight is really worth in the open market and what is a reasonable dollar amount for him to make, him specifically, for this fight. Because it is true, this isn't a fight that was as highly anticipated as the Vasyl Lomachenko fight. And this isn't a fight that's on the scale of a Ryan Garcia fight, a Gravante Davis fight, or a
Haney fight.
Devin Haney fight. I mean, this fight isn't where those fights are. This fight isn't worth what those fights are worth.
This won't get the reception that those fights would get.
Fiscally, financially, in terms of dollars and cents. So while Teofimo Lopez might want to get paid a certain way now that he is the unified champion to some, undisputed champion to others, while he might be insistent on a particular dollar amount for this engagement, that dollar amount may not make sense fiscally. It's George Kambosos we're talking about here.
I think a Lomachenko rematch would get a better reception than a Kambosos fight.
It's for this reason that when these kinds of subjects are often broached by the average boxing fan has no real understanding of why a promoter like Bob Arum operates in the fashion that he does. And put simply, it's because nobody, and I mean nobody, is in the business of just giving money away, staking vast sums of money, millions of dollars,
upon millions,
without some chance, good enough chance, of getting those millions of dollars back, let alone making a profit.
The slack-jawed gawkers that say Bob is just being cheap.
A very short-sighted and simple-minded answer from simple individuals with simple minds who are simpletons.
Would you wager a week's worth of wages with no real chance of getting it back?
That is a week's worth of your own wages. Would you stake those wages to stage an event, host it,
risk it,
with no real chance of getting that money back? Would you fritter your own money away? I don't think you would. So why are you expecting Bob Arum to do that?
With millions upon millions of fucking dollars.
These days, you could spit in the wind and hit some guy who's discussing the business of boxing without having any actual knowledge of the business of boxing. Its infrastructure, how the money is made, where the money comes from, what's at stake.
Fiscally.
The market value of a fighter, the market value of a fight.
And what the fight should pay out to the fighters based on that market value.
Because not all fights, world championship fights or otherwise, are created equal. A George Kambosos mandated title defense doesn't get the same reception that a Devin Haney fight would get, or a Ryan Garcia fight, a Gravante Davis fight. All those different fights got different market values. Based on those market values, that determines what the fighters ought to be getting for the goddamn fights. Some fights will bring you more money in the pot than other fights.
Like this one.
This George Kambosos engagement, I don't know what Teofimo wants to make. I don't know specifically the dollar amount that he's looking for, but I'd wager...
He wants to make more than what he made for Comey.
And he might even want to make more than what he made for Vasil Lomachenko. That's entirely possible. I understand Teofimo Lopez walking around here today with a chip on his shoulder for living up to his expectations, for following through on his word. It's just that the market value of a fight, it's not actually based on moral codes or ethics. It's based on what kind of money does the fight generate. Based on that amount,
What's in the pot?
what amount makes sense to pay out to the fighters without the fight itself being a financial failure, without the fight itself being a financial flop, an absolute loss for those who stake their own money staging such a fight, staging such an event. These concepts are often too complex for the simple-minded, slack-jawed individuals who will relegate the situation to simply Bob Arum being cheap. Well, I'll tell you what, hotshot, why don't you take a week's worth of your wages and just throw it in the air? Give it away to the next guy you pass by on the street.
Since you seem to think that money grows on trees.
I'd wager that the average guy you find calling Bob Arum cheap in this situation is in no more of a hurry to give away his own money than Bob Arum is.
I mean, maybe Uncle Bob really is pinching those pennies, but...
We are still in the thick of a global pandemic. For the past 12 months, the majority of them, live audiences have not been able to attend boxing matches. Live gate revenue has not been generated for the vast majority of cards that have been staged in the last 12 months.
What's the expectation in a climate like that?